guys, welcome back. So today I thought I would do more of a discussion. I was thinking about romance serials because I have been heavy on my romance short stories or novellas or whatever you want to call them lately, and one of the books that I recently read was actually a serial, and that got me thinking a while back, maybe like 5 or 6 years. I know that serials were all the rage. Now granted, they have been around for a long time, but they seem to have made an emergence, especially in the romance community, and it was a bit of a hot take. Definitely hit or miss, one of those things that you either love them or hate them, and so it's for that reason I figured I would just talk about it. There are pros and cons. I am trying to sort through my feelings on them because there are definitely reasons to enjoy them, and then there are definitely reasons why I can completely understand why they are so frustrating. So let's start off by talking about what exactly a serial is and how it's different from a series. Now, a series is something that I would consider more of a franchise. It takes place more often than not in the same world, and oftentimes you don't have to read those books in order. So, for example, in the romance genre, you guys have heard me talk about time and time again my Jill Shalvis series, the Heartbreaker Bay series, that follows a group of people. Each couple has their own story, blah, blah, blah. Now, for that, it is considered a series because it takes place in the same world. In this case, since it's contemporary romance, it is literally within the same town, but the books don't have to be necessarily read in order. Because it's romance, I wouldn't necessarily say that there are ever spoilers because you know more often than not who's going to get together and who the couple is. So in that case, it's less about the ending and more so the journey to get there. So when it comes to a series, you can start off reading book 5, you can read book 1, you can skip around, and you're not really missing any major plot points. They are more so standalone. Now, on the flip side, when it comes to serials, and again, I'm speaking more for the romance genre, they are oftentimes an overarching story that is broken down into smaller chunks. So more often than not, you would get, for example, authors releasing parts of their serial a few chapters at a time. Like I said, they are usually short, so you may get anywhere from, say, I don't know, 50 to 100 pages depending on how long or how many installments are in the serial. Now, what the huge difference is between serials and series is that serials end more often than not on cliffhangers. Now, depending on the storyline, that can be a major cliffhanger. So for example, in the middle of a scene or when a huge plot bomb has been dropped, or just at the end of a chapter to where you know that the story isn't complete, but yet you're not necessarily waiting at the edge of your seat because the characters have stopped speaking mid-sentence, like Sopranos finale style. Okay, so let's talk about why an author might be enticed to write a serial. So naturally, there are a few reasons why, and I'm sure your favorite authors, if you have read serials, probably fall under at least one of these categories. So number one, I would say, is a test market. So let's say as an author, you have an idea in your head, but you don't necessarily want to invest the time to write the entire novel of, anywhere from 50 to 70,000 words, but instead you maybe write 5 to 10,000 words and you release that. And you see how your audience interacts, engages with it. And so if they like it, you are enticed to continue on and so forth until the entire story is told. But if maybe it's not getting the reception that they are hoping for, then, they can probably either stop writing it or maybe alter it to where it wraps up quicker than having to, again, invest the entire 70,000 words to complete. Another reason, and I would actually reserve this more for maybe more popular authors because I feel like personally, that's when it would be more successful, and that is for teasers or to build anticipation. And the reason I say well-known authors is because those authors are usually more likely to have a larger following. Therefore, their readers are most likely going to not only devour their backlist, but also be looking forward to whatever they are releasing next. And so in this case, I'd say you'd have to be pretty confident as an author and in your work to release something like that. Prime example, I'm going to go ahead and use my girl Whitney G. I would say she is a pretty prolific romance author, and she has released serials. And as much as it pains me to say, I have found myself chomping at the bit and having built up anticipation for the next installment. So in cases like that, I would say serials are successful, though naturally there is some risk that comes with it. So that kind of segues into my next reasoning why, and that is to maybe build an audience with monthly releases or to build up backlog. So when it comes to serials, again, I would say the formula, not only is it going to be short little bite-sized, few chapters, but the releases are also going to be more frequent than if you were releasing a longer full out novel. And so instead of maybe releasing a book every few months or once a year or something like that, serial editions are released once a month. And so that kind of works in the favor of the author because they are constantly churning out work. And as a reader, you have something to look forward to from your favorite author every month, again, instead of once a year or every few months. The last reason would probably come as no surprise, and that is profit. Now, obviously, publishing is a numbers game, and while a lot of people do it as a hobby, most of the time authors do it to make some kind of bottom line, and that's where serials kick in. Now, again, I know I mentioned that serials were really popular a few years ago. I'll be honest, I don't know if the market is as big as it is today. However, I know that profit is also a driving force, and that is to say that if you, again, are releasing something on a monthly basis and your audience is there and they are wanting that work, then you could potentially have, guaranteed business every month instead of waiting until you are finished with your full-length book, which again doesn't come out until 3 months from now, a year from now, etc. So those are a few reasons why I think serials would be popular, at least from an author's point of view. But let's talk about why they might be popular from a reader's point of view, since that's the one where I've got the expertise, since I am clearly a reader and not an author. So when it comes to reading serials, I am on the fence. I'll be totally honest with you guys. I think for me, it really comes down to a few factors. One of them is the story, and then the other is the author. The last reasoning is my mood, but we won't even get into that. Now, when it comes to what the story is about, I think that this is really where an author's voice needs to be very strong, because not only does your plot have to be intriguing and keep me reading the whole thing, but you want to end it in a way to where I am both satisfied with the current ending and yet still wanting to look forward to the next installment. And that's hard to do, especially when it comes to romance. Now, I will say just really quick, I know I'm talking about romance serials, but it goes without saying, serials are done across all different genres. I know for a fact when I was doing research about this video, Andy Weir is a really popular author today that specializes in serials, and I know he does science fiction, but regardless, serials have to be books with a lot of action or driving force. You wouldn't necessarily see a serial that is literary fiction just because there's usually not enough action to drive the story forward or keep readers on the edge of their seats. So, mystery would make good serials, thrillers, actions, and romance, obviously, because that's what I'm talking about. Now, how exactly would a romance make a good serial? So from my experience reading serials, I would say that the characters have to be really intriguing, and there also has to be some kind of underlying action that, again, puts me on the edge of my seat. So, for example, I read a serial that naturally the core of it was romance, but the subplot was that the main hero was involved in some kind of mafia, and thus there was action because he had to save the heroine and he's on the run from people who are trying to kill him. So in that sense, there is some kind of action, because even though it's a romance story, it also has some action and thriller essence to it. Now, let's talk about the author. This is where I feel is very subjective, because I I have to be a fan of your work to pick up a serial. I need to already know your voice for me to even give a chance, knowing that I'm going into the story and it's going to end on a cliffhanger. So if that is done by an author whose work I am already familiar with and I like, I'm more enticed to give them a chance because I want to see how they handle the scenario. So again, perfect example, Whitney G. You guys know I adore her work. And so it's for that reason that the serials that she has written, I have been more enticed to give them a shot because I like her work. I know how she does her characters and I'm willing to risk it with the cliffhanger. Now, let's kind of talk about the flip side about why somebody might avoid serials. And it's a little contradictory because these are also the same reasons why I would avoid them, even though I just gave you reasons why I would read them. But anyway, the biggest issue is the cliffhanger. I know as a reader, and I'm sure you guys could agree with me, you don't necessarily want your book ending on a cliffhanger. You know, you dedicate this time, you get invested in the characters, only for you to get to the last page and it just stops and you're wondering what the hell is going on, what's happening. So in that sense, I can totally see the frustration and I can definitely see why people stay away from it. One thing that I would like to point out, because I remember this being a big deal again a few years ago when serials were all the rage and everybody and their mom was trying to write one. I believe that if you are going to release a serial, it needs to be explicitly stated either in the title or in the description. So if your readers at least know going into it that it's a serial, they at least have that expectation so that they're not duped or anything, because believe me, you wouldn't believe how many times I have started reading a book and nowhere in the description did it say anything about it being a serial, and then you get to the end and you realize that it's the end even though you thought it was only the next chapter, and that's completely frustrating. Another reason why people might avoid serial is for the simple length of it. You know, a lot of times people read books as escapism, and I know when I am invested in a character, I really get invested in what's happening with them, and I don't necessarily want to just have my journey with them cut short, even if it is going to be picked up in the next installment or whatever. So that is another reason why, especially if you know, you're paying good money for this, and if I'm paying however much I'm paying, you want a complete book. You don't necessarily want to be duped into having to buy the next 3 to 5 sets in the entire story. And so it's for that reason I can definitely see why people avoid them, because it starts to add up. You know, even if a book seems inexpensive as an ebook of, you know, let's say $2.99, if there are 7 serial installments, you're looking at $15, which, you know, maybe for a used hardback that's not bad, but as an ebook, $15 can get a bit steep. Okay, so another thing that I thought of, and I'm not exactly sure how to describe this in like a pithy little title, but essentially one of the things that would frustrate me, or that has frustrated me about serials, is that let's say I am really into the first installment and the second installment is already out, and then next thing you know, a month goes by and either I've forgotten about it or the author for some reason or the other has not released on a monthly schedule. You know, we're looking at 6 months have gone by and you totally forgot about it, or the author still left you hanging, and so it's just this annoying unfinished book that you have, which can definitely be maddening, especially if, you know, let's say the author has done a really good job so far to making you invested in the characters or the storyline, and yet you are left hanging wondering what the hell. And another thing, you know, say 6 months from now, you finally get to the book and you can't remember what happened, which I know for me happens all the time, not even just with serials. I have the memory of a gnat, you guys. So I need my books, you know, back to back to back so that I can stay in that mindset. And so I guess in that sense, kind of falling out of love with the story is another reason why somebody might avoid serials. Okay, so those are kind of some pros and cons. I will say, one of the things that I have found works for me, which is cheating a little bit, is I will wait until a serial is finished being written and released, and then I will pick it up. So I know by that time it's actually a full-fledged novel, but you know, that's the only way that I can kind of work around getting the story without having to wait, because I'm all about instant gratification. However, there are exceptions to the rule, as there usually is, and again, it comes down to authors. So I wanted to give you guys just a couple of authors as well as their serial books. So if you want to either dabble in serials or you are purposefully looking for some, because I will say they do work. I'm going on a tangent really quickly. Serials do work in certain scenarios, and I find, for example, they make excellent airplane reads because you can read the first half going to your destination and then the second half coming back, and it's kind of like a perfect little bookend. Or when you have just like quick bites to where you can only read or listen to books in the pockets of time. But anyway, if you are looking for serials so that you can use them for those situations, or even if, again, you just want to try them out, definitely check out Whitney G. She's got the Empire of Lies series, which I believe I talked about maybe a couple of months ago on my channel. The third installment just came out, so I believe it's complete already. You may not have to wait for her to release another one. Speaking of Whitney G, her Reasonable Doubt series is also another serial. Her Reasonable Doubt serial is also another one. This is one where I cheated, but in my defense, I didn't know going into it that it had been a serial, because by the time I finally read it, it was just a complete book. And so that's another really good thing about serials, is that oftentimes authors, or at least the good ones, will package it as an entire complete book once they're done with it, so that you don't have to buy each of them separately. Personally, I think that is helpful, even if maybe keeping them separate might help their bottom line. I think it is more important to think of your readers and put it in a complete package just for their ease, but I digress. Another author who is really good at serials is Beth Kery. She's got a couple, I believe. She was one of the well-known authors a few years ago when serials were really taking off, who did an excellent job with them. So definitely give her books a try, because she not only handles serials well, but just romances in general. And her series, Because You Are Mine, is the one that I'm thinking of, that is, again, really well done. Obviously, at this point, since it's been some years, the series or serial is complete, so you can buy it as a standalone full book if you choose to, but it did start out as a serial. So the three that I just mentioned are all contemporary romances, kind of bordering maybe on erotic romance, but they're not like sci-fi or paranormal or anything like that. However, if you are looking for a paranormal, then check out Luna Fabray's Lavender Cove Shifters serials. She's got a bunch of those. It's been a while since I read one of them, so I can't remember strong enough to give you a recap. However, I will say they are shifter romances, so that if you are interested, you can obviously check that out if you don't want a regular contemporary. But I hope you guys found this video helpful. Again, it was kind of just a discussion. I was thinking about it when I was kind of clicking around trying to figure out what book I'm going to read next, and you know, what novella I might want to keep in my back pocket so that I can pull out when I'm waiting in traffic or at the grocery store. So let me know in the comments below what you think of serials. Have you read them? Do you like them? Do you hate them? Do you avoid them? Do you not care? And it doesn't have to be about just romances, obviously, because like I said, serials span basically all genres. So if you watch this video and you are interested in serials, but you're not necessarily a fan of romances, then I definitely urge you to just do a little digging and check out some in a genre that you're interested in. Again, Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian, he is very famous for his serials. So that is another option, again, if you don't want to go the romance route. So please like and subscribe if you found this video helpful and you want to see more videos like it. And in the meantime, I'll talk to you guys later. Happy reading. Bye!